Thank you so much, HJ, and for all the work that everybody here has put into telling our stories. They're not just words. They give us identity. They give us community. And they give us progress. Never underestimate, no matter what language, no matter what accent. That's what we're doing. Don't undercut what we're doing here. This is so amazing. I'm so honored. I've never spoken at a group like this. My Korean-American story begins in Baghdad, Iraq. The year is 2006. They used to call this area the Triangle of Death in Arabic, as it was the most dangerous area in Iraq at the time, and some would say in the entire world. We would monitor the area. We would patrol in our Humvees, our big trucks. It'd be about 120 degrees, dust everywhere, and this little shimmer of light coming down from inside of your Jeep, sweat pouring down with 100 pounds of gear on. And we were overwatching what we thought was a mosque, a Sunni mosque. You know, they told us that there's Sunnis and Shia in Iraq. About this time in the afternoon, we would hear the call to prayer, which beckons the Muslim faithful to worship and pray together. Instead, we heard from the megaphone on the minaret something very different. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajjal faraju ala an adu ansur waladu maqtada, 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 ya Allah, ya Muhammad, ya Ali, ya Mahdi, as they all screamed. It was not the call to prayer. And not only that, it wasn't even a Sunni mosque. That was a Shia political rally. Muqtada al-Sadr, who were rallying together, and our intelligence was wrong. It was not the first time that our intelligence was wrong, so I wasn't so surprised about that. I was surprised because the Shia people, to be able to do something like this, on a minaret, to blare out their identity. You see, the Shia people were discriminated against, called unbelievers, worse than infidels. It was so hard for them that throughout the Middle East, especially throughout Iraq, the discrimination caused the leaders of the Shia tribe, the sheikhs and the ayatollahs, to teach their people, you know, if you are ever in danger of losing your life or limb, and some would even go so far as to say if you're going to lose your job, you do not have to express your Shia identity. And this is coming from Shia leaders, people who is their job to represent their people publicly. And they said, God will forgive you. Better that you live. You can do more work if you live. Be rational. And so came this kind of expediency of identity. Whenever it suited you, you could share your identity, but you would never express it in this country, Iraq, that we were trying to help make a pluralistic, representative democracy or something like that, where all the people, regardless of their tribes, regardless of their religion, regardless of their ethnic identity or whatever, could get all the resources, access all the resources, 100% of that federal government. And to know that people would teach their own tribe not to express themselves. That minaret, expressing those words unapologetically, was for me the wake-up call. Because I would go in front of these tribal reconciliation meetings and I would say, put down your tribal fights, animosities. We can work together. All people in your family deserve to be recognized, deserve life, deserve peace, deserve all of that. I would start off with this poem that everybody would listen to because it was the most famous poem in all of Iraq. I made very, very sure to memorize this before we deployed. Written by Mutanabbi 700 years ago. الخيل والليل والبيضاء تعرفني وسيف ورمح قرطاس وقلمه أنا الذي نظر لأعمال الشعر وأسمى كلمات من به السمم. The horses and the night and the desert, they know who I am. The sword and the spear, the pen and the scroll, they know who I am, they know me. I am the one that can make the deaf to hear my poetry. I am the one that can make the blind to read my prose. They know who I am. They know me. A very powerful poem of identity. 700 years ago. memorized to this day in grade school. Now, sharing that poem of identity, I could then say to those people, to the Iraqi people of all different tribes, your identity, who you are, is nothing to be ashamed of. No more philosophy of hiding and concealment. We called it taqiyya, was this philosophy that you don't have to share your identity when it suits you. And I realized this taqiyya philosophy was don't ask, don't tell. Our own leaders telling us. And I'm going to talk about the gay community. Our own Korean parents telling us. Or our own brother and sister telling us. That's what I realized. They were telling me to be expedient about my identity. And everybody asks me still today, well, when you survived Iraq, you decided to come out at a certain time. And some people think that there was a strategy to it. The reality was my mom, she was just so annoying. I came back. See, I knew there was agreement there somewhere. For my mom's sake, I tried to speed on, but you all wanted to laugh. You want to hear about it. She would ask me this one question every 5 minutes, at least every 5 minutes. When you marry the Korean girl, no, maybe you don't understand it. I have to say it right. When you marry the Korean girl, 언제? I was like, no, marry her. And it was like, we're going to have breakfast, and then marry the Korean girl. We're going to have lunch, marry the Korean girl. You get the master degree, marry the Korean girl. It was the answer to everything. Well, you're sad. You just need to marry a Korean girl. So finally, after a month of living at home, I was planning my coming out to my parents, way before any of this activism. I wanted to just tell my two most important people in the world. And my mom, she just said, why? Why, you know marry Korean girl? I said, no, I have to tell you something. And she said, I know. You marry the white girl? You marry the white girl? I was just going to go with that. It's hard to imitate my parents. It's not racist, right? It's lacist. Okay, so my mom, her eyes got so big, because I had to tell her, I'm not going to marry a Korean girl. And she said, tell me what's going on. I'll love you. Because I made her promise me, would you love me no matter what? Going home was like going to Iraq, but without body armor. And I was not afraid of the don't ask, don't tell in the military. I was afraid of Oman Appa, don't ask, don't tell. But my mom, she felt that she could have, a compromise or a nice solution to the whole situation. I told her that I'm gay and said, it's not your fault. I prayed about it, and I kept caveating it. I couldn't let her respond. I had to say, I'm gay, and I tried, and I prayed, and I did I know the Bible, this and this and this, and not even completing my sentences. And she just said, I love you, grabbed my hand harder, but gay is not real. Gay does not exist. That's what she said. And we had many very difficult conversations because of that. I had decided to live at home for 6 months, not just call every once a month and have a conversation about the possibility of marrying a nice Korean boy or something like that. Which, by the way, she got angry at that. She said, why are you taking 2 breeders out of the population? Nothing worked for her. I said, so I finally said, okay, and my dad woke up and he joined the conversation. My mom is now ready to negotiate something. And I say, okay, what if I have this big Korean wedding, right? I marry this Korean girl, you can pick this Korean girl. And she can, everything, all the requirements that you said, she speaks Korean, she is Christian, she cooks kimchi jjigae. and she went to Harvard. Those are the only recommendations that you wanted. And you can find that one. You can find her. All you have to do is tell everybody in the whole wedding, the whole ceremony, this is a fake wedding. It's not real love. My son is gay. And you can have this wedding, and I will play right along with you, and in front of my dad. And my mom said, well, can I invite, and before she could finish that, I said, you have to write it in Korean on the wedding invitation. She thought twice. And then before she could say anything, I said, and you have to write it in Spanish. And then for good measure, I said, and you have to write it in Arabic. To which she just looked at me and said, why did you invite this Arabic people to this wedding? Yeah, my dad is a Southern Baptist minister. And I didn't think I would get so much surprise. I'm sorry. If this was just white people, I would expect that. But this is Korean people. Okay, so apparently, people don't know that there's these people of Southern Baptist orientation in the Korean community. And I always ask my dad because I wanted to know, why did he choose this denomination? I said, do you know what they do? He said, exegetically, and he would give me this analysis. And he said, well, the Southern Baptist, and I wouldn't buy it at all. None of it made sense. He was reaching in a way they never reached before. He finally just said, okay, look, we're from South Korea, so we're Southern Baptist. And that's the only thing I ever believed. Nothing else made sense. Well, we had conversations, my dad and I. Sometimes he would be joking. He tried very hard to be analytical. He has to write these long analytical sermons all the time. So he said he would work on it, and he would study this situation, and he would study the issue and get back to me. He said finally, here are 8 sentences from the Bible. Here's 8 Bible verses, and I did my full research on this. And he concluded that being gay was a shame and a number one sin. The number one sin. This gave me pause because I said, Dad, I've been sitting through your sermons for 26 years, and you said the number one sin was not to accept Jesus Christ as your personal Lord and Savior. Now, what is the greatest command? You also taught me that. To love your neighbor as yourself. And then I thought, for good measure, I learned something called the contrapositive in college. It's still true. Love your neighbor as yourself being the top command. Then shouldn't it also be true? Hate your neighbor as yourself. Hate your neighbor as you hate yourself. And this is really where it comes from. When we talk about homophobia or hatred of gay people, or the idea of supremacy of a sexual orientation, a heterosexist or hetero-supremacist ideology. And so when I asked my dad what he felt about the Bible and my being gay, he finally said, the reason why there's AIDS in Africa is because one president of Africa made gay marriage legal. That's really what he said. And this was, I don't know if that's happened yet, but that was about 5 years ago. That had not happened yet. And so how do you respond to something like this? It's not very rational. How do you try to convince your dad that you still love him, that you want to be a good son? And so I just had to respond, well, I'm not African. And my mom just starts laughing, and my dad's pissed at this point. He said, oh, you're smart. You know your English. But then he said there's a verse in the Bible that said the fish swims this way, not this way. Fish swim this way and not this way. I don't know if that was a verse in the Bible, but I said, well, I'm not a fish either. My mom started laughing, and the whole while, my sister's roommate from college was sitting in the living room downstairs. She was supposed to marry me. She was the one that was supposed to marry me. She hears me yelling, I'm not African! I'm not a fish! And she wonders, what kind of a house am I going to be living in? I think she made the right decision not to marry me. But for 6 months, we had these conversations. My sister told me not to come out to my mom and dad. I told her a few months beforehand. The reason why was because she was so awkward about the idea. And she didn't want it to be awkward for her. Now, that's not what she said. She said it to me in very loving terms that who could say no to this? I just care about you. I just don't want you to be hurt. For your own safety, and then I complete the sentence, I should lie and not have a personhood. That's really what we do when we give our gay brothers and sisters an excuse for holding on to that very important knowledge. I don't tell that knowledge to everybody. Well, actually, I tell it to large groups, but I don't tell it to everybody I meet. It's to those people that are special enough to know. It's a lot like for me telling somebody what my religion is. If that person is special enough to know, then I should tell them. And if your mom and dad are the most important people in the world to you, as they gave you life, they're the reason why you live, so they judge you the most. Of course, we take that judgment. We're afraid of them. That fear. If you can tell truth, then you have found that freedom. Because it's not about going to a gay pride parade or even to an event where there's other people who look just like you and feeling like you're somebody, feeling like you're important. Not that time. When you go to the people that judge you the most, and that's what I felt I had to do. It wasn't about going to a gay pride parade. I had never been to a gay pride parade. It wasn't about experiencing TV. I had never wanted to be on TV. I wanted to tell my mom and dad because they were important to me. And not because I was a bad son, because they taught me, honor your father and your mother in the Lord, for this is right. You honor them by telling them the truth. Because if I told somebody that I hated, that I really didn't like, somebody that was my opponent, my enemy, wanted me dead, if I told them, if I had a conversation with them, you think that I would tell them all the intimate details about me. But how are you treating the people that love you the most? So I asked myself this question. And so I had to respond to my mom and my dad with just that simple truth, not because you're a bad parent, but because you taught me to tell the truth, even when it hurts. And I'm not going to say that it's all nice. That's not my goal in civil rights, is to say that all of us are wonderful, living great lives, and it always gets better. Sometimes it gets worse for it to get better for other people. And so when we validate those lessons, as hard as they are, honor the concept of telling the truth and having integrity. How can anybody say, we have to save face? What kind of face are you really saving? A face that's plastered over no integrity? That's not a face that's worth saving. So I told my dad, he didn't understand any of this. I was very combative most of the time during my activism. So I decided that this was not the way that I need to hold my parents' hand through it. We cut off conversation. For 5 years, we cut off conversation. No Christmas, no Mother's Day, no birthday, no nothing. No phone calls. They needed their time and I needed to do my work. And I realized that telling those people, it's painful at first. And you don't want to do it because you think that it's going to ruin their lives. But you don't realize that when everybody tells you in 10 years or 20 years they'll get it, that timeline of 10 years and 20 years doesn't start until you actually tell them. And so as Korean American people, not just with the gay issue, but with everything that we need to tell to our parents, this is my identity. This is who I am. This is who I am, and you made me. And we validate all of those truth-telling, honor, love, unconditionally. And to me, now that means that no matter what you do to me, it's not conditioned on that. My reaction is going to be love. And it might not be kind and nice, but my dad and mom told me that love doesn't always come in the kind and polite ways. And you have to tell somebody. If you love them so much, then you say, I trust you enough that you're going to get this one day. I love you enough that you're going to get this one day. That other guy, he didn't get this information. This is for you. This is what I have for you. I want to end with the poem that I started with, written by Mutanabbi. A very important name, 700 years ago. I didn't tell you the backstory about this. In Iraq, there was a very famous king who wanted a poem, aggrandizing himself. He remembered all throughout history, and nobody wanted to write it. But this one poet, new poet, he thought he could do it. His name was Mutanabbi, and he didn't have any privilege or class. He didn't have money. He didn't have a lineage. His mom had a jug of water over her head, was a servant woman. No lineage, no class, anything. And he wrote this poem. The horses in the night in the desert, they know who I am. The sword and the spear, the pen and the scroll, they know who I am. I am the one that can make the deaf to read my poetry and the blind to read, but my prose, they know who I am. And the irony of this great poem of identity, this king, this famous king, powerful, scary, intimidating, we don't even remember his name. They know me. We don't know you. We know the person who wrote the poem. Because with little skill that they had, even if it might hurt, even if during that day it wasn't honorable, it wasn't popular, he said, with this little skill I have, that's what I'm going to do. And we remember Mutanabbi 700 years ago. My challenge for you is that you be that person regardless of your skill, to tell that truth and to be remembered for all work.